Hi everybody. It is a beautiful kind of overcasty morning in Los Angeles. I am obviously in my car. I have a meeting in a little bit, but before I really felt like talking about breathing. And especially ways that we can use our breath to our advantage when we feel really bad, anxious, overwhelmed, and sort of the role that breath plays in anxiety, which is a pretty big one. So when you think about anxiety, right, it's like our brain's flight versus fight system is activated, and our brain kind of perceives some sort of threat, and it sends off a whole reaction of uncomfortable sensations and feelings. And the problem with anxiety is that usually the threat isn't real, or we think there's way more likelihood of something bad happening than it actually will. But anyways, part of the fight or fight system is hyperventilation, right? Where we're anxious, we start breathing like this, taking really short and shallow breaths. And when you do that, what happens is it throws off the rate of oxygen and carbon dioxide in your body. I'll spare you a physiology lesson, but when we throw off the carbon dioxide and oxygen, it creates lots of really uncomfortable sensations. And if you don't believe me, you could do a little experiment. For about 30 seconds to 1 minute, you can hyperventilate yourself, right? And that activates the fight or fight system. So you can do this. Time yourself for 30 seconds to 1 minute, and you'll start feeling really awful. And the reason for that is your heart rate starts beating up, you might start getting sweaty, feel a little dizzy, and that perpetuates the flight or fight system. So when we're really anxious, our body kind of makes us hyperventilate because it helps blood flow throughout our body, it helps us get ready for some sort of fight. But if there's no threat and we're hyperventilating and we start feeling really bad, our brain will go, oh, you're breathing really shallow, your muscles are tense, your heart's beating fast, there must be something bad happening, right? And then you're gonna become even more anxious and you'll hyperventilate even more. It's just sort of like this cycle that perpetuates itself. Breathing is especially important because it's something that we do all the time, I hope, but we're not super aware of as it's happening. And I know for myself and many of my clients, oftentimes we might start hyperventilating or breathing in ways that won't make us feel very good, totally outside of our awareness, right? For instance, even like if we're anticipating some sort of pain or we're anxious, usually people might start paying attention to their breath and notice that, whoa, I'm actually holding my breath a lot more than I thought I was. And even holding our breath, right, can cause a sense of tension and struggle and fight and can make the anxiety feel a lot worse. So if we start bringing awareness to our breath, not only can it be grounding and help us stay present, but if we're able to breathe in a specific way that I'll talk about in a moment, it can really help take the edge off anxiety and kind of put the brakes on anxiety. Now, I want to be really clear that the breathing exercise that we're going to go through is by no means meant to make you feel less anxious. And we know that as soon as we don't want to feel anxious, if we want to fight or push it away, we feel even more anxious, right? Because all of a sudden we become anxious about feeling anxious. And I'll have lots of other videos on that. You could check out my one on like why anxiety makes us feel so bad. But essentially, what we try to resist will persist, right? That's sort of a rule of thumb with anxiety. So we want to use these breathing exercises to be more present, to be aware, and to take the edge off of anxiety in order to help us do the things that we want to do, in order to help us really stare down those fears and make the changes. And we can use this not just anxiety per se, but for any strong, intense, overwhelming emotions. If we're putting the brakes on the fight or fight system, it's going to really help us be able to re-engage in life, what's here. So, having said that, a few things to preface. So, there's in the research, there's so many different types of breathing and ways that breathing's studied, and it's kind of confusing and complicated, but I'm gonna just give you the two takeaways to want to make sure you incorporate in your breath. And if you hit these two things, I think it's gonna be really helpful. Number one is you want your breath to be smooth and long, right? So hyperventilating, when we're in the flight or fight mode is activated and we're anxious, we breathe short and shallow. So smooth, long breath is more like this. right? And that'll regulate a nice, easy balance between oxygen and carbon dioxide flow in our bodies and help us be able to help us take the edge off and help us really be able to dampen that response. You also, the second part is you want to make sure the out breath is a little bit longer than the in breath, because the out breath is the one that's really going to activate our parasympathetic nervous system. And again, that's our body's brake towards the fight or flight system. So I recommend to start breathing in about like 4 seconds. We're going to breathe in through your nose, and we're going to pause and then breathe out through our mouth for about 6 seconds. Actually, I'm talking about like 6 solid Mississippis. And when you breathe out, if we don't purse our lips, it'll all come out at once. We don't want that. So when you breathe out, we want to purse your lips together so the air kind of flows nice and gently, like this. So let's take like 3 breaths like that together and kind of notice what that's like. So again, we're going to breathe in through our nose, pause, and out through your mouth. Pause. Good. In through your nose. Pause. And out through your mouth. Good. One more. Nice. So a lot of people notice, even just after 3 breaths, I can even feel it now. It's just sort of like a wave of relaxation and calm that wasn't there before. And again, I want to be really clear. It's nice to feel that. We don't necessarily want to go into it with the expectation that our anxiety will go away or that we'll feel better instantly, but just being able to take the edge off. And oftentimes we do feel better and the anxiety does reduce, but that's sort of a nice side effect versus being able to really take control of our breath and re-engage, like I said, back in life and be able to face down those anxiety-provoking situations. So again, the 2 takeaways when we breathe, we're going to be aware of the times in the day when we're holding our breath or when we're breathing shallow, and seeing if we can take a little bit more control of the way that we breathe and smooth and long breaths, and also seeing if we can breathe out a little bit longer than maybe normally we do. There's another way that I'm going to talk about in a different video, which is diaphragmatic breathing, and that could be an even a different but also a really powerful way to dampen our brain's anxiety response. But this is a really good, simple, easy way to start. And the more you do it, the better you're going to get. Just like most of the things I talk about, it's a skill, it's a strategy, and I'd recommend practicing at least like 10 times a day, 10 breaths a day, if you can, like 2 or 3 times a day. So it's like 20, 30 slow, long breaths. And I like to practice even when I'm in the car or waiting in line, and then during times when the anxiety might be really peaked, I can put this into play. And again, I want to be really clear that one of the best things that you can do for anxiety is this like acceptance and allowing the anxiety to be there. So again, don't use this as a way to fight the anxiety, but use it as a way to help you lean into it, right? And to be able to just fully experience it. And anxiety can be so overwhelming at first that sometimes it's really important to have something like this, again, to take the edge off, to dampen the flame a little bit. So that was my little introduction to breathing and how breathing's related to anxiety and ways that we can help when we feel really bad. And hopefully this is helpful for you all. I really hope everybody is doing well out there and hanging in during these just surreal, weird times. And remember to keep breathing no matter what happens. So thank you all, and I will see you in future videos.